You shoved my son into the lake like trash? I ripped Karen from her fake throne, seized her by that pristine blazer, and hurled her into the water she thought she ruled. She screamed. The crowd gasped. Phones flashed. It should have ended there. But it didn't. Because when Karen hit the water, we didn't just humiliate a tyrant. Stay with me. Because what we found after her splash shattered this neighborhood in ways no one, not even me, was ready for. Stay with me. Because what we found after her splash shattered this neighborhood in ways no one, not even me, was ready for. The surface of Glasswater Lake shimmered under the morning sun, flawless and still, like it had never known a ripple of real life. I stood by the oak-lined path, arms folded across my chest, watching Eli and two neighborhood kids race paper boats at the edge of the stone-lined shore. His laughter cut through the crisp air, pure and free. For a moment, I let myself believe we had found peace. Stupid. The click of high heels shattered it. Karen Devereaux strutted across the manicured lawn like a monarch inspecting her kingdom. White blazer, oversized sunglasses, clipboard clutched like a scepter. Behind her, three men in cheap navy polos stamped with HOA aquatic compliance followed. Chests puffed, radios clipped to their belts like they meant something. She didn't look at me. She never did. Her gaze locked onto the kids, onto Eli, like he was graffiti smeared across her perfect painting. No unauthorized recreational activities by the waterfront, she barked, voice slicing the air. Eli froze mid-laugh. One of the boys dropped his boat. I took a step forward, slow and deliberate. They're just kids, I said, voice low, firm enough to crack ice. Karen turned toward me at last, lips curling into a sneer. Children must be supervised within HOA-designated zones. Failure to comply will result in fines or removal. She said it like she was discussing litter, not human beings. I clenched my fists so tight my knuckles popped. But I stayed where I was, because Eli's eyes were on me, waiting, trusting. Karen didn't blink. She turned back to the boys, waving her clipboard like a weapon. Move along, or I'll move you. Her tone dripped with disdain. She saw no kids here, only obstacles, inconveniences. Beneath the thin gloss of community, this place was just another fortress, and Karen was its gatekeeper. As she stalked away, her heels stabbing the earth, I made myself a promise, carved in the marrow of my bones. If she ever laid a hand on my son, I wouldn't just fight back. I would burn down her whole paper castle and drown her crown in the very lake she thought she owned. The next morning, the rules tightened like a noose. New signs sprouted overnight along the waterfront. Authorized activity only. Violators will be cited. Karen's little army of compliance officers paraded up and down the lakeside in their ridiculous navy shirts, radios hissing empty static. I watched from my porch, jaw grinding. Eli stayed close to the house that day, building his boats on the picnic table instead of the water's edge. Every few minutes, he'd glance at the lake, longing flickering across his face, and then drop his gaze, pretending he didn't care. Karen had stolen something already, and I hadn't even thrown a punch yet. By the afternoon, she struck again. She strutted through the cul-de-sac like a peacock on patrol, clipboard slapping against her thigh. Neighbors stiffened as she passed, smiles shrinking, conversations dying mid-sentence. At the end of the lane, she stopped to berate a teenage boy for having his kayak tied too close to community shoreline. 3 doors down, she fined an old man for excessive decorative foliage. No one challenged her, not yet. I leaned against the fence, arms crossed, daring her to look my way. Karen's sunglasses slid over me like I was a speck of dirt. She smirked, just enough to show she wasn't afraid. Not of me, not of anyone. Keep him away from the water, she said, not even bothering to use my son's name. I straightened, every muscle bracing for the explosion she was begging for. You don't own this lake, I said, voice hard as iron. Karen tilted her head, mocking. Ownership is just paperwork, she purred. Control is behavior. Her meaning was clear. She didn't need a deed to rule here. She only needed people to stay afraid. I didn't move, didn't blink. I just stared her down until she turned on her heel and marched away, heels hammering the path like gunfire. She thought she'd won something that day. She had no idea how close she had come to losing everything. Saturday morning came wrapped in gold light and stillness. For once, the lake looked inviting again, untouched by rules, untouched by Karen. Eli and 2 neighborhood kids tiptoed back to the waterfront, cradling their little paper boats. Their laughter floated through the air, light and cautious, like they knew it wasn't allowed but couldn't help themselves. I stayed close this time, posted at the end of the dock, arms folded, watching, waiting. That's when Karen arrived. Not alone. She marched toward us with 3 of her HOA enforcers flanking her like palace guards. Each one puffed up in their fake uniforms, radios clipped tight, boots crunching on gravel. Karen led them straight to the kids, heels stabbing the dirt. "Unauthorized presence within the aquatic boundary," she snapped, waving her clipboard like it could cast spells. "Immediate corrective action required." The kids froze, boats slipping from their fingers. I stepped forward, voice sharp. "They're not hurting anything." Karen didn't even glance at me. "They're in violation. Step aside, Mr. Briggs." Mr. Briggs. Like I was just another item on her checklist. I didn't move. Karen's mouth twisted. A slow, deliberate sneer. Then, in one sudden, brutal motion, she shoved Eli. Hard. His small body stumbled backward, arms flailing, and he plunged into the freezing water. "Eli!" I roared, sprinting. The splash was sickening. The shock on his face even worse. 9 years old, dunked into cold lake water like he was garbage. For a heartbeat, everything froze. Karen stood over the ripples, chin high, hands dusting off her blazer like she'd just swatted a fly. Something inside me cracked. Not splintered. Shattered. I charged. I didn't yell, didn't warn. I slammed my shoulder into the nearest goon, sending him sprawling. Another grabbed for me. I snapped his wrist aside, drove my fist into his ribs so hard he gasped and crumpled. The third reached for a baton. I ripped it from his grip and cracked it across his knees, folding him to the ground. Karen shrieked, high and shrill like a cornered rat. I didn't stop. I closed the gap between us in 2 strides, grabbed the front of her immaculate blazer, and lifted her clean off the ground. "You touched my son," I said, every syllable carved from stone. Karen kicked, slapped at me, shrieked about lawsuits and HOA protocols. None of it mattered. I spun her toward the lake, her precious, pristine lake, and hurled her into it like the trash she was. Splash. Water exploded outward in a vicious arc. Karen's designer outfit soaked instantly, mascara bleeding down her face as she thrashed, coughing, screaming. I stood at the edge, breathing hard, fists still clenched, watching her sputter and flail. The entire shoreline had gone silent, neighbors frozen, phones raised. No one rushed to help her. Not one. And in that moment, dripping, choking, gasping in the water she once ruled, Karen finally looked as pathetic as she had always been inside. Karen flailed in the lake, her shrieks splitting the heavy silence. Neighbors gathered along the bank, frozen, phones raised, some half smiling, some too stunned to breathe. I didn't spare her another glance. I turned back to the mess she had dragged with her, her compliance squad, now scrambling to regroup. One of them, the beefy one who had reached for a baton, staggered to his feet, dripping blood from a split lip. He squared up like he thought he had a chance. Big mistake. I moved faster than his brain could process. I hammered a right hook into his jaw, felt cartilage shatter against my knuckles, watched him collapse like a sack of concrete. Another thug, the skinny one, tried to backpedal, arms flailing. I grabbed his radio, ripped it clean off his belt, and smashed it across his temple. He hit the ground in a twitching heap. The last one, the one who had dared to grab for Eli earlier, made the smartest decision of his life. He ran. Karen finally clawed her way out of the water, dripping and gasping, looking less like a queen and more like a sewer rat caught in a flood. "You're finished!" she shrieked, voice cracking. "I'll sue you into oblivion. I'll have you arrested for assault, for—" I cut her off cold. "You laid your hands on my son," I said, voice low enough to burn. "You shoved a 9-year-old into freezing water and thought you could hide behind your fake rules." I stepped toward her. Karen stumbled backward, heels slipping on the wet stones, arms flailing for balance. "No HOA in the world can shield you from what's coming," I growled. "You want to play dictator? You want to terrorize this neighborhood like you own it?" I jabbed a finger at the crowd gathering, at the silent witnesses, at the dozens of phones still recording. "You don't own anything. Not this lake, not this community, and sure as hell not my family." Karen opened her mouth to retort, but no words came out. Just a choking, sputtering cough as she struggled to stay upright, mascara streaking like war paint across her face. The neighbors? They didn't move to help her. They didn't look away. They filmed. They watched. And somewhere between the click of the record buttons and the ripple of whispered curses, Karen realized her empire had just begun to drown. And I wasn't done. Not even close. By sunset, the first video hit the internet. Not just one, dozens, different angles, different phones. Same brutal truth. Karen Devereaux, queen of glass water, screaming, thrashing, and getting thrown into her own precious lake. The title that stuck? HOA Tyrant Gets Tossed Like Trash After Attacking Kid. By midnight, it had crossed 200,000 views. By morning, half the town had seen it, and half the country wasn't far behind. My phone buzzed nonstop. Messages, screenshots, laughter, outrage. Neighbors who had barely nodded at me before now sent thumbs-up emojis, secret fist bumps, and invitations for coffee. Karen's ivory tower cracked at the base, and the cracks were spreading fast. She tried to fight back. By noon, she stumbled into the community center, soaked hair now blow-dried into a frizzy mess, heavy makeup caked over panic-slick skin, clutching a wrinkled stack of HOA bylaws like a drowning woman grabbing driftwood. She slammed her clipboard onto the front desk, bellowing loud enough for the whole cul-de-sac to hear. "Unauthorized media distribution, libel, defamation. All violators will be fined. This video is illegal." I stepped through the crowd, slow and steady. Neighbors parted, phones lifted. Karen's eyes locked onto me. And for the first time, there was something brittle there. Something cracked wide open. "This isn't libel," I said, voice cutting like a blade. "It's evidence." Her face twisted. "You assaulted my officers. You endangered community order." I barked a short, humorless laugh. "Those weren't officers. Those were thugs wearing cheap shirts and playing pretend." I stepped closer, every word deliberate. "You assaulted a child. You used fake laws to terrorize decent families. You think a clipboard and a title make you untouchable?" I jerked my thumb toward the phones recording every second. "You're not untouchable anymore." Karen opened her mouth, probably to threaten another lawsuit, another fine. But nobody was listening. Not anymore. Neighbors whispered. Mrs. Langston from Elm Street shook her head in disgust. Mr. Patel from Lot 17 folded his arms and stared her down. Karen's grip on the clipboard tightened, knuckles bleaching white. But no one moved to back her. No one flinched. And in that silent, heavy moment, Karen Devereaux realized her reign was over. She hadn't just lost authority. She had lost the fear. And without fear, she was nothing but a soggy, shouting memory of power. Karen didn't go down quietly. She stormed from door to door, clipboard in hand, barking threats like a desperate queen clinging to a collapsing throne. Violation notices, fines, bans from the waterfront, even suspension of access to the community park. None of it mattered. The spell was broken. Every slammed door, every phone pointed at her face, every whispered, "Not this time," carved deeper into her crumbling authority. And me? I wasn't just standing by anymore. I was organizing. Within a day, we had a private group. Neighbors I barely knew. People Karen had bullied for years. We met under porch lights, in garages, through encrypted group chats. Stories poured out like floodwaters. Mr. Patel had been fined $500 for unauthorized mailbox decor, a veteran's flag. Mrs. Langston had been threatened with foreclosure over a supposed non-regulation bird feeder. The Millers, a retired couple, had been slapped with escalating fees just for trimming hedges without HOA approval. Each case traced back to Karen. Each threat was hand-signed by her. We weren't just angry anymore. We were armed with proof. I sat at my kitchen table, phone buzzing with incoming screenshots and audio recordings. Each one another nail in Karen's coffin. I called Marcus Diaz, an old friend, now a bulldog of a civil rights lawyer. He listened quietly as I laid it out. Then he whistled low. "You're not dealing with a rogue HOA," he said. "You're looking at organized extortion, impersonation of public officials, possible mail fraud. This isn't petty." My mouth hardened into a grim line. "Good," I said, "because I'm not playing petty either." Marcus laughed. Short, savage. "Document everything. Chain of custody. We'll drag her through federal court if we have to." I didn't smile. I just kept forwarding him files, each one heavier than the last. Meanwhile, Karen spun harder, issuing emergency memos, inflating fake, emergency HOA regulations, trying to scare people back into line. But it was too late. The fear she had feasted on for years had rotted into something she couldn't digest. Defiance. And once people taste freedom, no clipboard, no fake badge, no scream of outrage can chain them again. Karen didn't realize it yet, but her kingdom was already ashes. All I had to do now was light the final match. Karen wasn't done clawing. The next Saturday, she called for an emergency HOA assembly at the Glasswater Pavilion, a last desperate attempt to seize back the fear she had ruled with. Flyers littered the mailboxes. Urgent community compliance meeting, attendance mandatory, legal ramifications for absence. The paper practically bled desperation. I showed up early, arms crossed, leaning against the back wall. Neighbors filed in, slow, cautious, clutching their phones instead of HOA notices this time. Karen took the stage like a drowned phoenix, wrapped in a blinding white suit, lips curled into a sneer too tight to pass for a smile. Behind her, a hastily printed banner sagged, "Glasswater Community, Unity Through Order." Pathetic. Karen slammed her clipboard onto the podium. "You have all witnessed the chaos unleashed by insubordination," she shrieked, her voice cracking on the microphone. "Our community is under siege by liars, by criminals, by thugs who refuse to respect law and structure." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Not agreement. Disgust. Karen didn't notice. She was unraveling in real time, clawing at any scrap of power she thought she still had. "I am invoking Section 12B of the Emergency Governance Clause," she announced, chest heaving. "Effective immediately, I reclaim full discretionary authority over all HOA functions, fines, and security." Dead silence. Then footsteps. 2 sheriff's deputies, uniforms crisp, eyes cold, pushed through the crowd. Karen faltered mid-rant. What is this?" she stammered, backing up. "Who authorized this interruption?" Deputy Rivas stepped forward, voice like a gavel. "Karen Devereaux," he said loud and clear. "You are under arrest for multiple counts of impersonating a public official, civil extortion, and child endangerment." Gasps broke out across the pavilion. Karen's clipboard clattered to the ground. "You can't!" she shrieked, stumbling back. "This is my community. I built it." I stepped out of the crowd then, calm and unblinking. "No," I said, voice low and sharp. "You poisoned it." Deputy Rivas seized Karen by the wrists and twisted them behind her back. The click of the handcuffs was louder than her screams. "You'll regret this!" Karen howled, mascara streaking as the deputies dragged her down the aisle. "You're nothing without me. You're—" Nobody listened. Nobody moved. Phones stayed lifted, lenses trained on her fall. As Karen was hauled out into the sunlight, a pathetic, shrieking ghost of power, I turned to the crowd and said exactly what they needed to hear. She ruled with fear. Now we build with something stronger. The applause started slow. Then it roared. Karen's crown was gone, and we weren't afraid anymore. The echoes of Karen's screams still hung in the air long after the squad car disappeared down Sycamore Lane. But something had shifted. Something real. Neighbors stood together now, phones still in hand, but no longer as weapons. They were shields, a new kind of armor against the fear that had ruled them for too long. I watched them, watched their faces change. The tight lines of suspicion. The hunched shoulders of submission. All of it unraveling. Mrs. Langston, who once whispered apologies for overgrown flowers, raised her chin for the first time in years. Mr. Patel, fined for daring to fly a flag, shook my hand hard enough to hurt. It wasn't just about Karen anymore. It was about what we had let her become, and what we refused to ever allow again. We called an emergency town meeting the next day. This time by our rules, not hers. No flyers threatening fines. No fake mandatory attendance. Just a simple message, passed from door to door. Bring your voice, bring your story, bring your freedom. The turnout overflowed the pavilion. They filled folding chairs, curbs, truck beds parked sideways across the lawn. Kids sat cross-legged on the grass. Dogs barked freely without Karen's imaginary noise violation fines. I stood at the front, hands steady, voice firm. No more kings, no more queens, I said, meeting every pair of eyes head on. We don't need rulers. We need neighbors. There was no applause yet, only the heavy, humming silence of people waking up. Good. This wasn't about easy victories. This was about earned ones. We voted that night, openly, no secret ballots, no backroom deals. The HOA dissolved. All fines voided. All fake compliance regulations shredded on the spot. We rewrote the charter by flashlight and stubborn hope. A simple rule, scrawled across the first page. No policy shall ever supersede basic human decency. Karen's name was stripped from every document. Her signatures, once weapons, were deleted like parasites from a healthy body. The lake was ours again. The streets were ours. Our voices, our laughter, our damn right to exist without permission. All of it ours again. And as I watched Eli run barefoot across the green laughing, hair flying free in the dusk wind, I knew we hadn't just taken back a neighborhood. We had taken back something bigger, ourselves. 2 weeks after Karen's fall, the new mural was finished. It stretched across the back wall of the old community pavilion, covering every inch of the peeling paint and broken promises she'd left behind. A different kind of monument. Eli stood beside me in the tall grass, one hand clutching mine, the other shading his eyes from the setting sun. He stared up at it. Really stared, letting the colors soak into his bones. A boy stood at the edge of a lake, arms outstretched, pulling another child from the water. Behind them, a cracked crown floated, half submerged, forgotten. Above them, painted in bold, defiant white. We protect our own. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. Neither did Eli. The wind carried the sounds of a new glasswater, kids laughing, bikes skidding across sidewalks, barbecue smoke curling into the sky without fear of a scent violation. Dogs barked, neighbors waved without flinching. Real life, finally breathing free. I knelt down beside Eli, resting my hand lightly on his shoulder. "You proud of it?" I asked, voice low, steady. He nodded without looking away. "Yeah," he said. "It's the best thing I've ever drawn." I smiled. The real kind, not the guarded half-smiles I used to wear like armor. "It's the best thing I've ever seen," I said. We stood there a while longer, just breathing. No clipboard wielders, no fake laws, no one watching us with suspicion. Just fathers, sons, neighbors, free. Eli finally turned to me, eyes big, serious. "Are we safe now, Dad?" I crouched lower so we were eye to eye. "Yeah," I said. "We're safe. Not because someone gave us permission. Not because some fake queen said we could be." I pointed at the mural, heart hammering with something too big for words. "We're safe because we stood up, because we fought, because we didn't let them tell us who we're allowed to be." Eli smiled, a small, fierce thing. For the first time in too long, the air felt light on my skin. Not hollow, not forced. Real. Karen's name was just a memory now, a cautionary tale whispered between fences, a ghost that held no power anymore. They said the HOA files were burned in a bonfire behind Lot 9. I didn't watch it happen. I didn't need to. The real fire was right here, in every kid running free, every dog howling without a leash, every neighbor planting flowers just because they could. The fire was freedom. Eli tugged on my sleeve, grinning. "Come on, Dad, race you to the dock." I let him bolt ahead, barefoot over the grass, hair wild in the golden dusk. I didn't chase him. I followed. And somewhere between the stretch of his arms into the wind and the shouts of other kids joining him, I realized something. We hadn't just saved our street. We had reclaimed our right to live without fear, without someone's permission, without a crown looming over our heads. We protected our own. And this time, no tyrant, no fake law, no Karen in disguise would ever steal that from us again. Not while we remembered, not while we stood together, not while we had the guts to say, "This is our home, and we will never kneel again." When the dust finally settled over Glasswater, it wasn't the broken rules or the fallen tyrant that stayed with us. It was something quieter and far more powerful. It was the realization that true community isn't built on fear. It isn't sustained by fines, threats, or a clipboard wielded like a sword. It's built by people who look out for each other. People who stand up when standing is hard. People who refuse to bow their heads, even when it would be easier to stay silent. Karen thought control would protect her. She thought that by forcing people to comply, she could create perfection. But real strength, real unity, isn't born from fear. It's born from respect, from compassion, from the fierce understanding that no one deserves to be treated like less. Not a neighbor, not a stranger, and certainly not a child. The lesson Glasswater learned that summer was simple, but it changed everything. When one of us is pushed down, we all have a choice. Look away and hope it isn't us next. Or plant our feet, raise our voices, and say, "Not here, not ever again." I didn't fight for revenge. I didn't stand up to Karen because I wanted a crown of my own. I did it because Eli deserved a home where he could breathe, where he could laugh without permission, where no clipboard, no uniform, no false queen could ever make him feel small again. And if you're hearing this now, wherever you are, know this. You have that power too. In your neighborhood, in your workplace, in your life. You don't have to accept the fear someone else tries to wrap around you. You don't have to wait for permission to stand tall. Sometimes, all it takes is one voice to break the silence, one hand reaching down to pull someone out of the water, one moment of courage to tear down an empire built on lies. If you've ever faced someone like Karen, someone who used fear to make themselves feel big, I want to hear your story. Drop a comment below and tell me. Have you ever stood up when it would have been easier to stay quiet? Or are you ready now to be the one who does? And if this story resonated with you, if it made you angry, made you proud, made you remember what real strength looks like, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next story about fighting back, standing tall, and protecting what matters most. Because this isn't just about one town, one HOA, or one Karen. It's about all of us. It's about remembering that real power, the kind no tyrant can steal, lives in each of us when we choose to protect our own. And trust me, when we stand together, no one, not even the loudest, cruelest voice, stands a chance.